In the heart of Texas, behind steel doors and razor wire, there's a gang with no hierarchy, no written constitution, no single leader, and yet somehow they become one of the most feared criminal armies in the Texas prison system. They call themselves Tango Blast, but in Houston they take on a name whispered with a mix of respect and fear. Houston. And inside the walls of some of Texas's toughest lockups, something strange happened. A gang with no chain of command began out-strategizing, out-recruiting, and out-powering groups with decades of structure. How? Because Tango Blast has only one rule. You ride for your city. And if you betray that, you disappear. Tonight, we go inside a world few survive long enough to talk about. A world where Houston Tango Blast grew from a small clique of inmates into an unstoppable force. One that now dominates prisons, bleeds into the streets, and shakes the balance of power across Texas. This is the story the state of Texas never wanted you to hear. And by the end of this documentary, you'll understand why. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dive crime documentaries. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's get into the story. Birth of a city gang. To understand Tango Blast, you have to understand Houston first. Not the skyscrapers or the stadiums, but the parts of the city tourists don't see. The wards, the hoods, the neighborhoods where the wrong color shirt can get you pressed, and the wrong friend can get you buried. Houston isn't just a city, it's a pressure cooker, and sooner or later, something explodes. But Tango Blast didn't start on the streets. It started behind bars. The origin, Texas prisons, late 1990s. In the 1990s, Texas prisons were dominated by traditional gangs. The Texas Syndicate, the Mexican Mafia, and Barrio Azteca. These groups were old, organized, and violent. They ran strict hierarchies and brutal initiation rituals. But there was a problem. Inmates in Texas prisons were getting younger, angrier, and less interested in taking orders. During overcrowding crises, rival city groups were being thrown into the same dorms. Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, each forming their own cliques for protection. At first, they were small, loose, disorganized, until one belief unified them. I ride with people from my city first. And so, the tangos were born. What is a tango? A tango is not like a cartel or structured gang. It's more like a city-based alliance, a group of inmates who band together based on hometown identity. You had D-Town Dallas, Houston Houston, Riots Fort Worth, ATX Austin, and others across Texas. These city cliques eventually merged into a loose but powerful alliance, one that spread so rapidly the Texas Department of Criminal Justice had no idea what was coming. But here's the twisted part. The same thing that made Tango Blast strong is what made them uncontrollable. No leaders, no ranks, no orders, just loyalty to the city and a rule. If you violate the code, the whole city turns on you. For prison officials, it was a nightmare because, unlike traditional gangs, you couldn't just throw the leader into solitary and watch the gang fall apart. Tango Blast had no head, so you couldn't cut it off. And in Houston, this decentralized system became something far more dangerous. Houston rises. By the early 2000s, Houston inmates started to outnumber nearly every other city inside Texas lockups. Houston's population boom created an unintended consequence. Every prison bus was filled with Houston, and inside that pressure cooker environment, Houston Tango Blast found its identity. A bold one, a violent one, a proud one. The symbols of Houston. Every tango city has its symbols. Dallas has a D, Austin has a ATX. But Houston, they went big. Hometown insignias, Astro Star tattoos, Bayou City emblems. The word Houston stylized like old-school prison ink, and the famous HTX Blast lettering. These weren't just tattoos. They were survival badges. To wear Houston ink meant you weren't alone. Your city had your back. And the more inmates got locked up from Houston, the bigger this army inside prisons became. A new kind of power. Here's the wild part. Tango Blast wasn't created to dominate the system. They were created to survive it. But their numbers were so huge that they naturally became the dominant force, almost by accident. By 2005, Houston had become one of the largest prison populations in Texas, and Tango Blast overall became one of the fastest-growing gangs in the state. Their decentralized code made them flexible, unpredictable, and extremely hard to police. And that's when the violence started changing Texas prisons forever. Traditional gangs have leaders, shot callers, generations of hierarchy. But Houston Tango Blast? They didn't care about any of that. And in a place ruled by violence and discipline, that kind of freedom creates a dangerous new environment. Tango Blast no leader advantage. Without leadership, they couldn't be decapitated. They couldn't be dismantled. They couldn't be infiltrated easily. And anyone who tried to flip on them didn't know enough to destroy them. It was genius and chaotic, because if there's no leader, who decides when it's time for war? The answer? Everyone and no one. A single beef between two inmates could ignite a full-scale riot. A disrespectful look could turn into a dorm takeover. A bad drug debt could spread across 3 facilities in hours. And Houston, with their numbers, often came out on top. An officer's testimony. Correctional officer, anonymous. These dudes, you can't control them. There's no boss to negotiate with. If one goes off, they all go off. It's like fighting a wildfire. Prison officials panic. By the late 2000s, TDCJ knew they had accidentally let a monster grow. But it was already too late. Tango Blast had become something terrifying. A gang with no leaders, but thousands of members. The first major bloodshed. By the time Tango Blast, especially Houston, had firm roots in Texas prisons, a seismic shift was happening. The older, structured prison gangs didn't like what they were seeing. To them, Tango Blast wasn't just competition. They were an insult. No bosses, no chain of command, no respect for the old ways. It was only a matter of time until the system exploded. The spark, the debt that started a war. At one medium security unit in 2006, a simple drug debt lit the fuse. A Tango Blast inmate from Houston, known as Little Ghost, owed money to a member of a traditional Mexican gang. Little Ghost refused to pay, not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't bow down. In the old days, refusing to pay a gang tax was suicide. But Tangos? They weren't afraid. They weren't trained to negotiate through shot callers. They were trained to handle their own business and let their city back them up. When Ghost was cornered in the showers, 5 deep, the Houston dorm reacted instantly. It wasn't planned. It wasn't ordered. It was instinct. The shower ambush, a moment that changed TDCJ. Another Houston Tango heard the struggle. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, 20 Houston members flooded the showers. No words. No negotiations. Just fist shanks and fury. The officers who rushed in didn't stand a chance at controlling it. They sprayed chemical agents. But adrenaline and loyalty are stronger than gas. The riot lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of chaos that would reshape the balance of power. Several inmates were hospitalized. 2 nearly died. Dozens were pepper sprayed, beaten, or dragged out bleeding. But the message was clear. Tango Blast had numbers, and they were willing to use them. Aftermath, an unstoppable expansion. Prison officials tried lockdowns, tried separating the cities, tried isolating the key members. But it did nothing. Why? Because there were no key members. Everyone was key. Everyone held authority. Everyone held the responsibility of the city. The riot wasn't ordered. It simply happened. And that terrified the old gangs. The code of house tone. Unlike structured gangs, Tango Blast is a loose, unwritten rule book. But don't let that fool you. These unwritten rules are often more enforced than the written constitutions of older gangs. And Houston, they carry their own unique spin on the code. Let's break it down. Rule 1. Ride for city. If you're from Houston, you rep Houston, inside and outside. If a Houston Tango calls for help, you don't ask why. You move. This rule alone is why they're so dangerous. It creates instant unity, instant action, instant loyalty. Rule 2, no politicking. Unlike other gangs, there are no political games, no power grabs, no formal meetings. The only politics is the city. If your city's involved, you're involved. Rule 3, don't make the city look weak. In prison, reputation is everything. A single weak link puts a target on everyone from that city. If one member disrespects the clique, Houston Tangos are known to handle it internally, quickly and brutally. This is what keeps their brand strong. Rule 4, loyalty over rank. Since there are no official ranks, loyalty becomes the only currency. You can't rise in Tango Blast, but you can be respected, and respect means survival. Rule 5, keep the law away. The more the cops know about Tango Blast, the more it weakens them. Some members don't openly declare leadership. They don't hold meetings with agendas. They don't have formal recruitment ceremonies. This keeps them invisible, and that invisibility is a weapon. Rule 6, don't snitch. Ever. For Tango Blast, snitching is the biggest betrayal, but the punishment isn't always dramatic. Sometimes, you simply disappear from the city circles. No one eats with you. No one protects you. No one acknowledges you. In prison, being alone is a death sentence. Recruitment, the blast process. Despite their growing numbers, Houston Tango Blast doesn't recruit recklessly. In fact, joining the blast is harder than you think. There's no formal jump-in, no ritual beating, no official ceremony, but there's a vetting process. Step 1, city verification. You must be from Houston or have deep roots there. Tango Blast is a city family, not a universal gang. If you lie about your city, that's a blood debt. Step 2, character check. Older tangos observe new inmates quietly. Do they fight? Do they fold? Do they create problems? Do they handle business? Are they loyal to other Houstonians? It's not about being a bully. It's about being dependable in the chaos of prison life. Step 3, test of loyalty. There's no formal initiation, but loyalty tests are real. A fight, a confrontation, a moment where you have to choose the city or yourself. If you hesitate, you don't get in. If you step up, you're embraced. Step 4, the marks. Once you're solidified in the blast, you may start getting inked. Not official gang symbols, but city pride tattoos associated with Houston. The Astro Star, HTX, Bayou symbols, Old English Houston. These tattoos become your armor, your identity, your declaration. Prison life under Tango Blast. By the time Tango Blast cemented its place in Texas prisons, daily life changed for inmates and officers. If you were a Houston inmate, you were protected. If you were from a rival city, you watched your back. If you were staff, you were dealing with a new kind of threat. Tango Blast dominated key prison markets. Control shifted fast. Store goods, cigarette trades, contraband flow, cell phone distribution, gambling tables, nighttime dorm control. Tango Blast flexibility allowed them to control the economy without needing a central figure to run it. Each dorm handled its own business. Each city clique handled its own circle. But they all knew one truth. Houston was the backbone of the blast. A corrections officer describes a shift. Officer, we knew the old gangs. We knew who to watch. We knew who made the calls. But Tango, there's no one to flip, no one to punish, no one to isolate. You lock up one Houston Tango, 5 more step up. The night Tango Blast took a unit hostage. This was an official hostage takeover, but it was worse. At one overcrowded unit, a disturbance broke out between rival cities, Dallas and Houston. By sundown, officers were locked out of 2 dorms. Who locked them out? No one. Everyone. Tango Blast didn't claim the takeover. It simply happened because they had numbers, anger, and opportunity. For 6 hours, Houston Tangos controlled the dorm. They kept outsiders out. They kept officers out. They kept rivals out. And when the CERT team stormed in, most Tangos blended back into chaos. Who led it? Nobody. And everybody. That was the problem. That is still the problem. The intercity wars. As Tango Blast grew, something unexpected happened. It wasn't the old prison gangs that became their biggest rivals. It was each other. Because when an organization is built on loyalty to your city above everything else, that city pride doesn't stay peaceful forever. And nowhere was that more clear than the rivalry between Houston and Dallas. House Tone versus D-Town. The civil war nobody saw coming. For years, they were allies, both under the Tango Blast umbrella. But prison alliances crack fast when power is involved. Dallas was older, established, respected. Houston was younger, wilder, and explosive in numbers. The tipping point? A fight in a rec yard in 2008. No weapons, just fists, just pride. It started as a simple dispute over a basketball game. Trash talk, shoves, posturing. But when a Dallas Tango shoved a Houston Tango in front of the entire yard, the message was clear. You don't run this place. And Houston never takes disrespect lightly. The yard explodes. One punch turned into 10. 10 into 50. Within seconds, the entire yard transformed into a city versus city brawl. Old inmates would later describe it as a war zone disguised as a recreation yard. Officers were overwhelmed. Chemical agents filled the air. Batons cracked against bodies. Men were dragged, sprayed, beaten, restrained. But the animosity outlived the lockdown. For years afterward, tension between Houston and Dallas Tangos simmered in dorms, hallways, chow lines, and transport buses. Prison officials created the problem themselves. To reduce violence, TDCJ tried segregating inmates by city groups. But all that did was strengthen city identity. They didn't isolate gangs. They isolated cities. And when the doors reopened, the first spark reignited everything. The carceral kitchen. The more powerful Tango Blast became, the more valuable they became to someone else. Cartels. Because the streets of Houston, one of America's largest drug trafficking hubs, are full of cartel influence. And when cartel soldiers get locked up, they need protection, power, access. Tango Blast provided all three. How cartels leverage House Tone. Cartel affiliates entering TDCJ quickly realized something. Tango Blast controlled movement. Tango Blast controlled contraband. Tango Blast controlled the dorms. Tango Blast controlled the phones. Tango Blast had numbers. And Houston was a major drug pipeline city. Cartels didn't need to take over the prisons. They just needed to partner with the group that already had the power. And in Houston units, that was Houston Tango Blast. The unofficial pact. There was no signed agreement, no formal handshake, just a simple understanding. We move product, you run the floors. Cartels provided money and connections. Tango Blast provided muscle and distribution. The result? Contraband flowed like never before. Prison cell phones, the real gold. Contraband cell phones became the lifeline of the operation. A single phone, worth $1,000 to $3,500 inside a Texas prison. And Houston Tangos controlled the network. Drop-offs coordinated with outside associates. Dirty officers bribed or threatened. Phones smuggled through kitchens, laundry visitation. Street dealers reporting to inmates on lockdown. It wasn't a gang. It was a logistics empire. Street-level expansion. While Tango Blast evolved behind bars, something unexpected was happening outside. The streets of Houston started mirroring the prisons. Clandestine street crews were forming, loyal to the same city and brotherhood mentality. But unlike prison, there were no dorm walls containing the chaos. The street rules are different. Outside, Tango Blast isn't always a gang in the traditional sense. It's more like loose crews, cousins, friends, cliques, neighborhood sets, parolees banding together, old cellmates linking up on the outside. Some members go legit, jobs, family, stability. Others dive deep into the underworld. And then there are the worst of them, the ones who use the Tango identity as a license to do whatever they want. Robberies, home invasions, drug trafficking, stolen cars, street beefs, shootouts, all fueled by the same thing. If one member is in trouble, the city backs him. The streets feed the prisons, and the prisons feed the streets. A dangerous cycle formed. Young street guys get inspired by older inmates. They get locked up. They join Tango Blast. They get released. They bring the prison culture back to the streets. This isn't a gang. It's a pipeline. And Houston, with its massive population, became the center of it all. Major case files. Law enforcement agencies across Texas eventually caught up to the threat. But every major bust only revealed how deep the network truly ran. Let's break down 3 high-impact cases involving Houston Tango Blast. Case File 1, Operation Bayou Crash. A multi-agency sting targeting Houston. Parolees linked to Tango Blast. Recovered 26 firearms, 90 pounds of meth, stolen vehicles, cash, prison phone ledgers, dozens of cell phones smuggled into nearby units. Investigators found something shocking. The entire operation was coordinated by 2 inmates serving time for unrelated charges, using contraband phones. Case File 2, the I-45 shootout. A drug debt spiraled into a violent retaliation shooting on a Houston freeway. Ballistics tied the shooters to a known host-owned clique. They weren't acting as a formal gang. They were acting as loyal brothers enforcing a debt. This is how Tango Blast functions. No central command, but powerful enough to execute organized retaliation. Case File 3, the prison for hire hit. One of the darkest cases involved a cartel-connected Houston Tango ordering a hit from inside a Texas unit. The target? A rival dealer in southeast Houston who refused to pay. The hit was carried out by street-level associates, all of whom claimed they were acting for the city. This case exposed the one truth officials feared most. Tango Blast wasn't just a loose prison gang anymore. It was a hybrid street prison network capable of organized violence. The price of chaos. But every rise comes with consequences. And Tango Blast's biggest strength, its lack of structure, would soon become its greatest weakness. Because when no one is in charge, no one can stop the chaos from spreading. The internal collapse. As membership skyrocketed, 2 problems exploded. 1, no discipline. Newer, younger members didn't respect older tangos. They didn't follow the original unwritten rules. They acted out, created beefs, and drew heat. This caused conflict inside the clique itself. 2, too many self-proclaimed leaders. On the streets, a vacuum formed. With no hierarchy, every bold member acted like a leader. That meant rogue missions, unsanctioned shootings, impulsive violence, unnecessary retaliation, dirty operations attracting police attention. The older generation saw it happening, but they couldn't stop it. Because how do you correct an organization that was never meant to be an organization at all? The dark riots. By the early 2010s, Tango Blast had reached a boiling point inside Texas prisons. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about territories, economies, and egos. And when an unstructured gang grows faster than anyone can control, violence becomes inevitable. Let's look at 3 riots that define the host-owned era. Riot 1, the Beeville Meltdown. It started with a gambling dispute. Small money, small problem. But a Dallas Tango got into it with a Houston Tango. And when you mix pride with prison politics, a $20 disagreement can turn into a war. A fistfight broke out on the Dayroom floor. Houston Tangos jumped in. Dallas Tangos responded. Then a Fort Worth clique entered the mix, trying to break it up, but ended up fighting both sides. By the time officers swarmed the unit, 40 inmates were involved, 8 hospitalized, 3 nearly bled out from homemade blades. What started as a small conflict became a massive city versus city riot. There was no leader to blame, no one to punish, just chaos. Riot 2, the Kitchen Lockdown Massacre. This riot began in the kitchens, one of the most dangerous places in any prison. Inmates have access to knives, boiling water, metal trays, pipes, broom handles, grease, and corners with no cameras. A Houston Tango was accused of stealing meat. He wasn't just disrespecting the kitchen. He was disrespecting the city of Austin, who ran that particular work crew. 2 cities clashed over a stolen tray of food. Within seconds, 2 knives went missing. 5 inmates slipped into blind spots. A melee erupted behind the steam tables. When the dust settled, 3 inmates were airlifted to hospitals. Prison officials called it one of the most violent kitchen incidents in recent Texas history. But again, no leader ordered it. It was spontaneous combustion. Riot 3, the Midnight Storm. This one was different. It didn't start with disrespect. It didn't start with gambling. It didn't start with food. It started because one inmate cried. A young Houston inmate, new to the system, broke down during a shakedown. Officers laughed at him. A rival city group mocked him. The older Houston Tangos watched in silence. Then one of them stood up and said 6 words. "He's ours. You don't touch him." When a rival pushed a kid, full-scale war broke out. Inmates described the nighttime battle as a hurricane in a locked room. When CERT teams stormed a unit, over 60 inmates were involved. The message was simple. No one messes with Houston, not even the weakest one among them. The prison economy wars. People assume prison gangs fight over race, respect, or territory. But the real reason? Money. And in Texas prisons, money doesn't look like stacks of bills. It looks like ramen, coffee, stamps, hygiene, pouches of tuna, contraband phones, protection fees, dope. These items form a billion-dollar underground economy. And Tango Blast, in all cities, wanted their piece. But Holstone wanted more. The smart move that gave House tone control. Houston Tangos figure out something other groups didn't. Whoever controls. Recreation controls the economy. Why? Because rec is where deals happen, where debts are collected, where leaders talk, where contraband moves. While older gangs fought over formal positions, the kitchens, the janitorial jobs, the laundry, Houston Tango seized control of the basketball courts, the handball walls, the bleachers, the weight cages, the track area. These weren't just places to relax. These were their boardrooms. And if you owed money, they would see you during rec. You couldn't run. You couldn't hide in your bunk. You couldn't slide into a bathroom. The rec yard was controlled by Houston. So the economy was controlled by Houston. The dope triangle. Inside the units, the drug market is split among Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Tango Blast. But in Houston-heavy units, the power shifted. Cartels preferred working with tangos because tangos had more soldiers, more reach, more flexibility, more influence on the streets. Cartels don't like hierarchy. They like results. Houston gave them results. And in return, they got product. More product equals more power. Federal attention. As Tango Blast's influence spread, the feds took notice. At first, federal agencies couldn't understand the structure. There was no structure. It wasn't a traditional organization. So how do you prosecute a gang? That isn't technically a gang. You don't. You prosecute the results. The FBI shifted strategy. By the mid-2010s, the FBI, ATF, and DA began targeting networks, clusters, cells, phone trees, loose cliques, inner-city connections. Not one single Tango Blast organization, but dozens of small nodes that collectively formed the whole. They tracked wire transfers, cell phone calls, commissary purchases, visitation logs, known associates, parole movements, social media flags, tattoo patterns, and slowly a map began to form, a map that showed something terrifying. Houston wasn't just the biggest tango city. It was the central hub of an entire statewide spiderweb. The ATF called them the most unpredictable gang in Texas. Why? Because you cannot infiltrate a group that has no leaders to infiltrate. You cannot flip a chain of command that doesn't exist. You could not negotiate with ghosts. Tango Blast was a living organism, and Houston was the beating heart, the spread to other states. Tango Blast influence didn't stay in Texas. It leaked outward, quietly, organically, without planning. Parolees who left Texas took the culture with them. Soon, documented tango affiliates began appearing in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, not as formal chapters, but as pockets of brothers who shared a city-based identity. Houston Tangos especially spread fast. Houston has one of the highest relocation rates in the country. If you move, your identity moves with you. The prison influence became a street identity, and the street identity became a regional footprint, the shifting image of house tone. By the late 2010s, something strange was happening. The outside world began romanticizing Tango Blast. Prison culture was leaking into music, fashion, tattoos, and social media. Videos emerged of street crews flashing city hand signs. Parolees bragged online about reppin' HTX Blast. Some members hated it, claiming it disrespected the roots. Others embraced it, using the image to build clout on the streets. The identity that once meant survival was becoming a brand, and that brand spread faster than anyone expected. Inside Houston Tango Blast, Texas's most dangerous prison gang. In the end, Houston Tango Blast didn't rise because someone planned it. It didn't spread because someone wanted power. It grew because a system built to contain violence accidentally created the perfect storm for it. Inside the walls of Texas prisons, where survival is a daily negotiation, where every meal, every shower, every step can be a test, Tango Blast became more than a gang. It became a survival language, a shield that later turned into a sword. And once that sword left the prison system, once it hit the streets of Houston, it never stopped cutting. Tango Blast isn't the biggest gang. It isn't the oldest, but it may be the most unpredictable because it doesn't answer to a single leader, only the chaos that created it. And maybe that's the real danger. You can negotiate with a kingpin. You can dismantle an organization. But how do you stop a ghost? How do you dismantle something that was never built? This story isn't just about Houston Tango Blast. It's about Texas prisons. It's about the pressure cooker. It's about what happens when survival becomes culture and culture becomes war. Because the truth is simple. If you want to understand the violence in Texas streets, you have to understand the violence behind Texas walls. If you made it this far, you're the kind of viewer we make these documentaries for. And if you want more stories like this, the algorithm won't show them to you unless you tell it to. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive into the hidden world behind America's most dangerous prison gangs. This has been Inside Houston Tango Blast, Texas's most dangerous prison gang, and until next time, stay safe, stay aware, stay curious.